Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me to this wonderful conference. I especially thank Professor Dr. Dave Marshall for the invitation. We worked together for a long time, did research together and publications, and I'm happy to discuss today theory and practice of a new research area I'm working on. And I have a presentation on that is more theoretical and practical, and I hope that sheds some light on the topic of digital preservation of culture and local knowledge. I'm a professor at Ostfalia University of Applied Sciences in Germany, in Suderburg, close to Uelzen, that's between Hamburg and Hanover. And I'm also the managing director of a non-profit institute in Suderburg. Let me talk about the theory of digital preservation of culture and experiential knowledge today, but also very practical considerations out of a research project that we are hopefully starting soon. Here, a brief description of myself. I was 20 years in business, in investor relations and publications and public relations, financial advisory, and I'm with Ostfalia University for 15 years by now, and I publish and research. This is where Suderburg is, the Uelzen province between Hamburg and Hanover. Personally, I live in Berlin, and if you ever come to Uelzen, just get out of the train station, look at the train station. Is designed by Hundertwasser. You see it on the left-hand bottom side. And then you can go further. Not much more to see, but it's a lovely area where other people are on vacation. I'm working. We did international workshops and seminars out of that whole topic is developing. And you see Dave Marshall here on the left-hand side visiting Germany in 2018. 2019 again, Dave Marshall was with us in the workshop in 2019 in Suderburg, Uelzen, and in Lübeck on a conference on e-learning. With Dave Marshall, I published Digital Trust at the Workplace, an groundbreaking analysis of digital trust based on people, technology, and processes. It's published in the International Journal of Scientific Engineering and Science. Another dear friend of mine is Professor Fatih Çetin. I work with him on intuition, rational and intuitive decision-making, and we created the instrument rhythms, excellent for researching decision-making. I run international collaborations in my own institute, Unabhängiges Institut für Dienstleistungen, and it's an independent institute for service management, non-profit businesses. I also do in these institutions conferences. It started at Ostfalia, then we put it into our institute with 12 partners around the world. 10 of the logos you see here, and the 9th conference was in 2025. Very small, but 2026 we plan our next conference. So let's talk about the theory and the resources we can base the whole idea of experiential AI for digital preservation on. That is about individual experience, tactic knowledge, emotional, contextual knowledge. That would be the externalization via qualitative methods and AI-assisted elicitation. Experiential knowledge, is knowledge layer, validated narratives, and connecting decision points. We have knowledge graphs, embeddings, metadata that needs to be encoded. We talk about collective intelligence outcomes for learning, foresight, and resilience and preservation. This is moderated by culture, ethics, governance, and motivation we need to talk about in this presentation. So the theoretical foundations is knowledge-based view, as described by Grant, Van Gogh, Baylis, and Barley. Tactic versus explicit knowledge. We're talking about a socio-technical system and human-centered AI. Digital preservation beyond artifacts towards lived meanings. We're working and organizing with learning algorithms. That means meaning and sense-making in artificial intelligence. That leads to the encoding of values in machine learning in research. Most AI, however, analyzes data, predicts outcomes, and optimizes decisions. We're researching decision-making based on artificial intelligence. However, experiential AI and the preservation of local and cultural knowledge is about encoding lived experiences that captures judgment under uncertainty. That's personal knowledge. It's not maybe fact-based. And it extends knowledge beyond management and data centers and facts. Preservation, oral, indigenous, and local knowledge. How do you transfer knowledge of people into AI? That is about expressing your local knowledge. Retaining context, values, and situational meanings. That means all that the people tell us need to be put in a context culturally and from the facts connecting to the outer world. We need to avoid reduction to decontextualized data. It needs to be also tested, all the knowledge. We're talking about different epistemologies. So what counts as knowledge and what is wisdom? Where is the border? Narratives versus analytical knowledge preferences. Some cultures privilege storytelling, lived experience, and oral transmissions, while others emphasize formal models, metrics, and analytical abstractions. So there are cultural differences as well. We are at risk of Western-centric AI representation. Well, we have the Chinese version, when we have the United States version. So there are also different approaches on AI. We have a need for epistemistic pluralism and cultural co-design. Sustainable experiential AI requires participatory design approaches that respect multiple knowledge systems and involve local communities in defining meaning. There are also ethical and cultural risks. Digital colonialization and cultural appropriation. When experiential data is extracted, standardized, and controlled by external actors, AI systems can reproduce colonial power relations, misinterpretations of indigenous or minority knowledge. It can be both sides. People can express their knowledge about their indigenous culture, but others can criticize it. By reducing culturally embedded practices to data points, risks distorting their meanings, stripping them of spiritual relations and historical significance. Power asymmetries in defining valid experience. Those who design and govern AI systems often implicitly determine which forms of experience count as legitimate knowledge, marginalizing alternative epistemologies. So who decides on what's right and wrong? We have a need for participatory governance structures. So ethically, sustainable experiential AI requires governance models that involve effective communities in decisions about data collection, interpretation, and the use. That needs to be orchestrated. We have a technical architecture of preservations that we need. So multi-model data ingestions, text, audio, video, sensor data. Natural language processing, systematic embeddings. Natural language processing and embeddings enable the interpretation of narratives by capturing meaning, relationships, and contextual similarities, rather than simple keywords matching. Knowledge graphs, linking experience, decisions, and contexts. Metadata standards are needed for provenance and cultural context. We have some key technical issues we will talk later, more practical, but in theory, capturing tactic and emotional knowledge without distortion, very difficult. Context loss during abstraction and encoding is more than likely. We have a bias in training data and representation. Yeah? So experiential data sets reflect existing social, cultural, and organizational biases, which can be amplified by AI systems if not explicitly addressed. Long-term model drifts and knowledge decay. What does it mean? Experiential knowledge involves over time. Without continuous validation updating, AI models risk becoming outdated, misaligned, or misleading. We talked about data governance and infrastructure briefly, so we need an on-premise and sovereign cloud deployment. Fine-grained access and role-based permissions. Who can access this data? Sometimes you want to have it public to preserve knowledge. Companies and other organizations may want to have their own AI structure that permission is granted. Versioning of experiential knowledge. Experiential knowledge evolves over time. Versioning preserves historical context, supports learning from past interpretations, and prevents the silent overwriting of meaning. Auditability and explainability of AI outputs, that is to maintain legitimacy and accountability. AI-generated insights must be traceable, interpretable, and contestable. That is in particular when used for decision-making affecting people and communities. Then there's a need for validation and quality assurances as well. From the theory, cross-cultural and cross-domain validation is the keyword. Experiential knowledge must be tested across cultures, professions, and contexts to ensure insights are not locally biased or falsely generalized. So the same subject might be seen differently in different cultures, Western, Eastern cultures, maybe also religious, different backgrounds. The triangulation of qualitative and AI-generated insights. That means combining human interpretation with AI-supported analysis. We will talk about that in practice. Increasing the validity of compensating for the limitations of each approach. The detection of contradictions, redundancy, and noise. A lot of things that people will talk when they feed their knowledge into AI might not be important. Who is taking out that noise? AI systems can support quality assurance and identify inconsistencies, duplicated patterns, and irrelevant signals within an experiential database. Humans are in the loop for evaluations mechanisms. Ongoing human oversight is essential to interpret results, correct errors, and ensure ethical and contextual appropriativeness of outputs. There's also an organizational implementation problem. Resistance to sharing experiential knowledge. Who wants to share, who not? There might be different levels and different quantities. Employees may be reluctant to externalize tactic experience within a company because it is closely tied to identity, their status, and professional power, and sharing can be a loss of uniqueness or control. There's a fear of surveillance and loss of autonomy. When experiential data is digitally captured, individuals may fear monitoring evaluations or behavioral control, reducing trust and voluntarily participation. There could be a misalignment with incentive systems. If organizations reward short-term performance or individual outcomes, employees lack motivation to invest time and effort in sharing experiential knowledge. There is a need for integrating with existing workflows. Experiential AI that disrupts established routines or increase cognitive and administrative load are likely to be resisted and bypassed in daily practices. It's also a big issue, business and societal value creation. Improved strategic decision-making under uncertainty. A lot of information can improve our decision-making. Organizational learning and foresight, or the retention of critical expertise amid demographic change. Sustainable preservation of cultural knowledge here is the key. Beyond economic value, experimental AI supports the long-term preservation of cultural, local, and indigenous knowledge in ways that respect meaning, context, and community ownership. So from a theory point of view, the first conclusion is lots of things need to be discussed for digital preservation as an experiential, cultural, and strategic topic. Experiential AI requires socio-technical alignment in many ways. And business administration plays here a central role in shaping human-centered AI futures. Business administration can support this process. In the team, we discussed the practical implications of experiential AI for preservation. There are technology issues, sociological issues, and management issues. There's a whole team of people I discussed the topic with, like Professor Guanxin Chen from the Western Michigan University, Professor Fatih Çetin from Başkent University in Turkey, Professor Dr. Joanna Paliskevich. I have been to many conferences on digitalization, in-depth discussion with Professor Markus Anthony from China, Professor Tang Xu in China from the Shenzhen University of Information Technology. That was last year. Professor Dr. Yahan Hu from Taiwan, and also actually 3 publications, book publications and others with Dr. Joanna Roszak-Shiroka from Częstochowa University of Technology in Poland. So what did we discuss? And let me summarize that a little bit. There is a technology stack of AI paradigms. We talk about natural language processing for narrative and interview data. It's machine learning for pattern recognition and clustering, large language models for sense-making and knowledge synthesis, knowledge graphs for structuring experiential knowledge and human-in-the-loop AI for validation and ethical control. So that are the technology things that need to be addressed. There need to be a privacy-centered system architecture, on-premises deployment of AI system and databases, local installation of large language models, and no transfer of sensitive experimental data to external servers to ensure the privacy if needed and before tested. Role-based access control and identity management. Who is accessing this information? People who give their knowledge would like to know who can access their knowledge. And there need to be a compliance with GDPR and organizational data policies. The knowledge elicitation. Cognitive task analysis has to identify decision points and cues that later connects the knowledge. Critical decision methods has to reconstruct expert reasoning. Concept mapping supporting by AI-assisted visualization tools. And the translation of tactic reasoning into machine interpretable structures. Lots of technical issues from IT point of view. The data collection and human augmentation is another issue. Expert interviews capturing tactic and experiential knowledge. That means AI-assisted retrieval later of expected information. Exploration of unknown and emergent insights. And there's a synthesis of individual variations into collective tactic knowledge. The human augmentations through AI, what does it mean? Connecting dispersed data points into cognitive networks from different people, different topics, in a different language from different cultures need to be connected. Supporting creativity and insights generation. Augmenting, not replacing human sense-making. Recognizing heterogeneity in expert expression styles. So there might be many different words, meanings, and values that are used in this process. It's an AI-supported data analysis. That means thematic analysis of narratives and decision episodes that need to be defined. Cognitive mapping, of course, affect relationships. The grounded theory helps developing, supporting AI clustering. AI tagging and semantic annotation of content is also needed. Advanced AI analysis functions are needed in the process for the detection of tactic decision points, identification of unclear or implicit reasoning steps, the recognition of cluster of experimental decisions, and the visualization of cognitive and experiential patterns. The knowledge storage and preservation is important. AI-generated experiential knowledge maps how to store that and how to access it later. Knowledge graphs linking actors, contexts, and decisions. Narrative repositories preserving context and the meaning, and also case libraries for experimental learning. We need an AI-assisted retrieval of tactic knowledge and decisions. Not an easy task. Validation and cross-cultural robustness. Well, we need a robust tool, so we need to validate across countries, professions, and personalities. The same topic might be seen differently in different countries, have different backgrounds, different words. Different professions are working on that from different points, and each person has a different way and character of preserving knowledge. There need to be quality checks for accuracy and reliability. There need to be an assessment of conversions, contradictions, and duplications. And the duplications might be in different languages that we not see in the first place. The AI assessment on organizational implementation, there must be an evaluation of AI performance and usability. An integration is needed into organizational workflows, and the assessment is needed for long-term sustainability. And there's a continuous learning and system refinement that develops the system over time. Guiding research and design questions are a lot. How does experiential knowledge shape critical decisions? Which transfer formats best preserve experimental meaning, not tested yet? How can AI securely extend experiential knowledge over time? And how can preservation avoid cultural and cognitive distortion? Emotional and multimodal analysis, another key problem. The extraction of emotion cues from audio and video data, how to extract it. The detection of hidden and withheld knowledge. Did the person tell you everything? Did they tell you in a different way? So maybe he's still hiding information. Maybe he even wants to mislead you to not access his personal knowledge. We need to identify logical gaps in narratives. Yeah, what is missing? And then AI needs to ask questions on the missing parts. Iterative AI-supported follow-up questioning is then needed. Consistency checks across modalities. And there's a technical risk of preserving experience. The loss of context during the abstraction, the emotional misqualification and bias, how it's going to be used, how it's going to be interpreted. Maybe it's different than the people were telling you. Over-standardization of lived experience. All of a sudden, it's over-standardized and not individual anymore. Long-term interpretability of stored experiential knowledge is another problem. We're coming now to the sociology perspective of experiential AI. People need to store their knowledge from different cultures. Experiential AI is a socio-technical system shaping learning and meaning. Societal outcomes depend on ethical design and the good governance. The core tensions are connection versus control, embodiment versus automation, inclusion versus bias. Risk of transformation into shared wisdom of surveyed infrastructure is a key problem here. So experimental AI and human flourishing is a topic. Potential to transform individual and collective learning is possible. It supports reflection, meaning-making, and wisdom accumulation. However, it requires participatory governance and cultural sensitivity. Ethics must be treated as a design principle and not an afterthought and general statement. Cultural and familial preservation is important. Experiential AI as a digital memory system for family and societies can be on all different levels: personal information, families, groups, companies, countries, or globally. The preservation of ancestral narratives and indigenous knowledges is possible. Imagine all the knowledge from the Incas, the Indians, and other tribes were restored. The Egyptians, how did they build the pyramids? If that would be stored excellently. What we know now can be stored since we have now AI, and that will be very interesting in 100 years to still access our knowledge from today. Addressing time-critical disappearance of oral traditions is a topic. To strengthen intergenerational continuity and belonging, very good storage later to analyze from a sociological perspective. It's a cultural memory and a history of a place, encoding narratives connected to specific places and communities. Preserving local practices, rituals, and situated knowledge can all be stored with pictures, audio, and with speech. Preventing cultural erosion in rapidly urbanizing societies. Knowledge, especially from the countryside, we're losing. People move to the city, have a more urban life, and all the knowledge might be disappearing. We are reconnecting individuals to shared cultural identities. Inclusivity and knowledge demonstration. Connecting experiential insights across hierarchies, that can be accessed from everywhere. Amplifying marginalized or tactic voices. It can reduce over-reliance on formal expert knowledge. And it can align with wisdom and crowd logics. It's a multi-level knowledge integration. Integration of frontline, managerial, and expert experience can all be combined. Collective sense-making across professional strategies and strata. AI as a mediator between people and cultures rather than authority. Risk mitigation through diversity and experimental inputs. Learning and emotional intelligence, very important and positive sociological impact. AI-supported reflection and experiential learning. It is fully supported. Analysis of multimodal signals, voice, facial expressions, body language. With the new AI technology, it's not only words and words that we type or say, also how we say it, tonality, and our body language. Development of empathy, mindfulness, and attentional awareness would be a great outcome. Support of symbiotic human-AI collaboration between human and machine interaction. Experimental learning and decision quality from a sociological point of view, the cultivation of explorative rather than confirmative decision-making. We can reduce the cognitive rigidity under uncertainty. We can improve emotional regulations in high-pressure contexts. We have a framework here with my friend Professor Chetin in the rhythms framework to have an empirical grounding to store the knowledge. Organizational foresight and collective memories. Experimental AI as an institutional memory system. We can learn from the past failures, near misses, but also the successes. We can replicate the effective experiential patterns and enhance organizational resilience and adaptability. Misinformation needs to be identified. Amplification of misinformation and superstition needs to be identified. Mass contagion and negative bias effects. The reinforcement of groupthink of epidemistic echo chambers. And there's a need for AI-supported epistemic corrections and mechanisms. That needs to be developed technically and socially to detect misinformation. We have epistemic risks, and we have a need for collective sense-making. So the social reinforcement of distorted experiential narratives. It's difficult distinguishing lived experience from false beliefs. Is it just a saying? Did he make it up? Or did he really experience it? AI as both risk amplifier and corrective agent. There's a requirement for transparent curation and validation. So it needs to be recorded and shown what was taken away and what was used. Like Wikipedia, there are lots of organizational issues where you have to decide which information stays in the system and which one does not. Privacy and surveillance, well, there's a pressure to disclose intimate emotional experiences. Blurring of boundaries between work and identity. And there's a risk to convert monitoring and data commodification. Ethical erosions and trust breakdown is an issue, so there might be a loss of psychological safety. If all the information is stored in AI, who are you? It may reduce the willingness to share authentic experience. If all the information is in the system, what do I need the humans for? If the information is in there, if a Markus Launer is in the system installed, you can talk to Markus Launer online in AI. Why you need to talk to me personally? Maybe no need. The instrumentalization of human reflection, a problem. Long-term erosion of organizational trust. It might be if you store all the information that the trust goes away and says, oh my God, they take all my knowledge and I don't have any control. Loss of autonomy and authority with over-reliance on AI-mediated reflections. There might be an erosion of embodied intuition and inner awareness. There might be technocentric shifts in consciousness. Risk of human experience becoming algorithmically normalized. That means the machine can really replace humans. They can replace Markus Launer because I am stored in the system. There might be manipulation and misconduct, the vulnerability of hacking and data theft, psychological targeting, attention engineering. You can do that. Economic and political exploitation of experiential data. It can be used. You know, things that you say now in a special system might be wrong in a different system. You tell a story now, and 10 years later, what you have said is not allowed anymore. So there's a risk of algorithmic paternalism. Cultural and ethic complexity, cultural variation in definitions and wisdom knowledge is very diverse. There's a risk of Western epistemic dominance, maybe China and United States, and all the other cultures, they are not in the system, they're technically and from a structure not implemented. A distortion of appropriation of non-Western traditions. How can you access Eastern indigenous knowledge with a system and structures designed by Western technicians? There's a threat of digital colonialism and cultural homogenization. So we have participatory governance models, community-level consent and control, cultural stewardship that we need rather than ownership, and institutional accountability of long-term societal impact. Now we're coming to another topic, management and motivation. Why should experts share the experience? How technically, personally, you get the information into the systems? Experimental AI depends on voluntary externalization of tactic knowledge. You cannot tell people you have to do it. What is the motivation? It varies across cultures, job levels, organization, and personalities. Every human on a different level in different culture has a different motivation to do that. How to research and find out what is the motivation the people bring them to record their knowledge. Knowledge sharing is managerial and governance challenge, not only a technical one. So it needs to be managed by managers. There's a qualitative and mixed method research needed to design such a system. So tactic knowledge sharing as a motivational process. Tactic knowledge is costly to articulate and emotionally embedded. Experts face the risk when sharing experiential insights, all their knowledge is stored. Motivation determines knowledge, quality, depth, and authenticity. AI adoption hinges on trust, perceived fairness, and control. Self-determination theory might help for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. We have a cultural framework from Hofstede that might help in this regard. Knowledge management and IS research for sharing behavior. So AI acceptance and trust literature is needed. So the cultural moderation of knowledge sharing. Motivational drivers differ systematically across national culture. What works in the Eastern culture might not work in the Western, South, or North. Cultural orientation shape the perceptions of AI legitimacy. A one-size-fits-all system is not effective. A motivational framing must be culturally adaptive. Let's take the example of Germany. Motivation in low-power distance contexts. The preference for transparency on procedural is rigor in Germany. High uncertainty avoidance and the need for reliability. We need an emphasis on professional competence and technical credibility. Clear data governance and control increase the participation. Germany is the world master of GDPR. In China, motivation might be higher in power distance contexts. There's an importance of hierarchical endorsements in China, collective recognition and group harmony. You maybe not want to say something that the harmony disturbs. The relational trust over procedural transparency. And there might be an alignment with collectivist work orientations. In the United States, motivation in a very individualistic context. There might be a strong emphasis on autonomy and self-expression, personal recognition and visibility. I want to be quoted. I want to be in the system as a person. Are there opportunities for innovation and creative contributions? Is AI an enabler of individual impact? So, hypothesized motivational models could be cultural orientation moderates motivational framing effects, autonomy, competence, relatedness appeals, and the willingness to externalize tactic knowledge needs to be explored. Maybe we need feedback loops influencing AI learning quality. There are managerial design implications. Culturally different incentive systems. Like I said, Germans, Chinese, Americans have different incentives to store their knowledge. transparent communication of AI purposes and limits. And there's a different sense in each culture for that. The recognition mechanisms aligned with cultural values, it needs to be interpreted in different cultures. And there's a managerial responsibility for the ethical framing. There must be risk and control mechanisms. Fails and manipulated information inputs need to be taken out. The loss of identity and proprietary knowledge needs to be assured. There are psychologically discomforts and alienation that need to be addressed. There's a need for validation, consent, and withdrawal options. There are also legal and ethical considerations. Who's the owner of the experiential data? How about informed consent and recoverability? The responsibility needs to be defined for downstream of AI use. And the alignment with labor and data protection laws, and that might differ in different countries, very strong. Analyzing experiential motivational data. So the qualitative interview analysis supported by AI needs to be ensured that there is a good process and a correct process how to store the data. Automated categorization and quality checks, where to store the data and how to connect it. A ranking of expertise levels and interviewees. Within a company, the CEO has a different perspective than the worker in the factory. Statistical style reporting of qualitative patterns are maybe requested. AI-supported reporting and decision support. The generation of multi-perspective analytical reports. There will be different perspectives that needs to be addressed. Detection of inconsistency and missing insights. Connecting the dots and asking questions how to connect the information. Support for better managerial decision-making. If you want to use that system for decision-making, it needs to be a support tool to support humans. We need to avoid single answer AI outputs like we have in ChatGPT right now. We need to tell the problem areas, the different cultural insights, and all the problems around the decision. Decision-making emotional intelligence. Experiential AI improves decisions under uncertainty. It supports emotional regulation under time pressure. Like I said, our framework supports in this regard. Empirical validation of qualitative findings is needed. Sectorial applications. So now we're talking different jobs. Healthcare, early recognition and diagnostics is possible. Skill traits, quality assurance and error reduction. In education and public administration, we have great administrative support. In disaster management, we have rapid sense making and short response times. Motivation as a success factor. So without motivation, experiential AI will fail. Management designs, shapes, and knowledge quality. The cultural sensitivity is the strategic capability. So the ethical motivation enables sustainable AI adoption to have a continuous process in an organized way. That assesses some practical thoughts on the topic. Also the theoretical basis. We talked about technical issues, sociological issues, and management issues. If you have questions, ideas, how to do that, where to apply for funding, if you want to establish a research project, I love to be part of that, support that, and be in the process. Here are my contacts. at Australia University of Applied Sciences or my Institute for Nonprofit Services. You also find me on Facebook under Professor Markus Launer. Again, thank you very much, Professor Dave Marshall, for having me at this wonderful conference. And I wish you all great presentations, great discussions, excellent outcomes, and I hope to meet you all in person sometime soon. All the best to everyone. Hope to see you soon.